Hi everybody, welcome to week 2 in Humanities 103 Mythology. Here's a look at your course schedule for the week. You'll see that you have a 2-part discussion post. There is one due on Thursday, and that's the reading response, and then the peer responses are due by Sunday. And you have some readings and a video to watch. Here's what your module looks like. I'll run down these really quickly to give you a sense of what these are. 3 Types of Myth is a short book chapter which talks about 3 very general different categories of myths that are very useful to think of. Theories of Myths is a short video that I think you'll find interesting. The Problem of Similarities is a great article which addresses the idea or the quandary of why myths from different times and different cultures seem to have some really similar characters or events or those sorts of things. For example, most of you are familiar with the story of Noah's Ark from the Hebrew Bible, but did you know that there is an almost identical story that shows up in the Epic of Gilgamesh over 400 years earlier about a flood, and it even includes a big boat and all the animals and 40 days of rain. It's really amazing, and that story was written long before Noah's Ark. So the question is, why? How does all that happen? And so that's addressed in that article. The next 3 are important articles for you to read: 19th century, 20th century, and contemporary views of mythology. And what this does is just give you a very concise overview of some of the important scholars and theories that were being implemented during those times. And it's really interesting to see how the analysis or the interpretation of mythology has changed over time. And then there's the link to your discussion number 2, which is called The 3 Types of Myths. Here is just the briefest introduction to how myths have changed over time. So in the 19th century, think about who was doing this. You know, a bunch of old white guys who were traveling around the world and looking at so-called primitive, and I'm doing air quotes when I say primitive, races, and listening to their stories and recording them, and really just looking at mythology as something that belonged to these primitive, almost, infantilized cultures that had nothing to do with them, of course, that was just something that they were observing in these other people. Leonard and McClure point out that their main focus was just looking at the similarities and dissimilarities in their languages and sacred narratives. 20th century saw some really interesting shifts in thinking. So mythology became much more interdisciplinary, primarily with psychology, because this is the era at the beginning of the 20th century with Freud and Jung and these people who are beginning to think about how the subconscious works, dreams, how we think symbolically, and we're thinking about what does myth have to do with that? Also, a recognition that myth actually had a function in their contemporary societies. The myth wasn't something that was just ancient and irrelevant. It was primary to how people think and live their lives. And in the 20th century, this is us now. So people thinking about, how does myth work today? What does myth say about our racial identity, about our gender, our sexuality, cross-cultural studies, thinking about how myths impact things like movies, video games. So really, really interesting things going on in the study of myth today. I'm going to change gears just a little bit here, do a little bit of housekeeping. I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that at the end of discussion number 1, I posted a rubric which will be used to grade all of your discussion posts. I'm not going to cut and paste it into every single discussion. If you ever need to refer back to it, you can just go back to discussion number 1. But this shows you that all of your discussion responses are, for the most part, divided into 2 parts. A reading response, which is almost always due on Thursday. So read all of the content for that week, respond to the prompts as thoroughly as you possibly can, and then a peer response, which is responding to 3 of your peers' discussion posts, also following the provided prompts, so you don't have to just, pull stuff out of the air. Read the prompts very, very carefully and make complete peer responses. And both of those sections are worth 10 points. There are a couple of discussion posts that do not require a peer response. And of course, that's written right into the instructions. They're still worth 20 points. That just means that all of the points then are due to the reading response. So hopefully all of that is very, very clear in the discussion instructions. Remember, if you ever have a question, please post your question to the Ask the Instructor discussion forum so that other people can see the answer too. I just put this screenshot up here actually in response to a question I got this week about word count. I have to be really honest with you. I'm not really a huge fan of word counts. However, I have learned in my long experience as an instructor that if I don't give people some guidance about how many words really constitute a good, thorough, complete answer, if I don't specify word counts, I'm going to end up getting like 1-sentence answers, and of course that's not useful for you. So really what these word counts are, they give you a minimum number of words that I believe is required to do a good, thoughtful response to the question. Okay? I really don't care what the upper limit is, honestly. If you've got a lot to say about something, I'd love to read it. But please pay attention to those minimum word counts. Peer response, in this case, this says 150 to 200 words each, so 3 peer responses, each one of those needs to be a minimum of 150 words. This actually brings up a really good tip that a lot of times actually composing in those dialog boxes is a little difficult. You don't have all the tools that you do in Word. So especially if you anticipate a fairly lengthy discussion response, and if you're a person who has a little difficulty with spelling and things like that, I strongly urge you to compose your response in Word and then spell check it, grammar check it, make it all pretty, cut and paste it into the discussion forum reply box, and then post it. And that way you can also check your word count to make sure you've hit that minimum. And a quick reminder that I have chat office hours every Tuesday between 10 and 12. That's a quick way to get an answer about anything related to Canvas or course content. If you have a question for me outside of office hours, post it in the Ask the Instructor discussion forum. If you want to reach me individually about something, really the quickest, most efficient way to do that is through the Canvas inbox email. It goes straight to my WSU email, but I'm on Canvas so much throughout the day that if you post a question in there for me, I can usually get back to you pretty quickly. Okay, have a great week, and I'll talk to you later.